This conference will now be recorded.
Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Hey, hi.
Hi, sir. Good
Uh,
morning.
are you gonna start the session or are we waiting for someone else?
This
So let's wait.
conference will now be recorded.
Okay. I'll just share my screen. Okay. Just tell me if I'm audible properly and if you can see my screen.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Yeah. So my name is Sandeep and I'm working as a DevOps senior consultant in an organization, IT firm. So I've been working in the DevOps environment like around 11 years of experience I do have on the different technologies and tools and process that inculcate DevOps into an organization. So I predominantly work on AWS cloud, where I do the infrastructure and provisioning and automation and all
Sa-
those things.
Sandeep,
Yeah.
can you please little bit louder?
Uh, yes. Let me just try to. Is it fine now? Is it
Yeah,
okay?
yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you. Okay. I'm working as a senior DevOps consultant in an IT firm, and I do have an experience of 11 years. Been onto the different DevOps transitions and using different tools and technologies and understanding DevOps and inculcating that into my organization. Uh, and I predominantly work on AWS cloud, and I do the provisioning and infrastructure automations and all that which is related to my organization and all. So let us understand what is DevOps and why do we need DevOps and why do we need to learn the DevOps and all those things. And I see like the people like who are all joined this call could be related to they are already working in some particular domain in the IT. They could be the developers or they could be the operation guys, a system admin, and or someone wants to upskill themselves to the DevOps and someone wants to just understand what is a DevOps and why it is currently so much being used in the companies and all that. So let us try to understand those things like what is exactly DevOps and why it is useful and whether it is a tool or whether it is a process or whether it is a programming language or something like that. So to understand that, I want you to understand the basics of how what exactly the things work in an IT firm. So like what is that you do generally is like development and operations, and we always see the developers writing the code and developing the application and testing the code, writing the unit tests and all sort of things in their world. Like they have their own ideas where they want to develop an application. It could be a product, it could be a normal a customer requirement or a stakeholder requirement or something like that. And we do have operations team, which is the team which would be generally working in taking up that code and deploying the code into the application servers or building the infrastructure at their end, so that those applications can be run in the infrastructure and at the end users can consume that application. So this is a very typical scenario that we see in the companies. Like take up any organization, this is what we see. So where exactly DevOps stands here? Uh, exactly, the DevOps is something which breaks the silos between these two teams and which stands in between them. So the general problem that we hear in the companies is the code is working in my laptop. It's very much fine. I'm able to pull the code or write some feature for that, and everything is working perfectly in my laptop. But it's not working in an production environment or a staging environment or whatever it is, where end user is able to look into that feature and consume that feature. So this is a very typical scenario that we see, and the operation team should be saying that developer teams are having the issue. They're not using the software that is need to be used. Like let's suppose the production has a Tomcat 9, but the developer has a Tomcat better version than the production one. So these kind of conflicts arise all the time, and integration of the code, right, like taking the developer code and trying to package it and try to deploy into the server, and so that the people will be using that, that is a very difficult challenge all the time we see. So DevOps is something which sits between them and tries to break those walls, so that the developers and operation guys or whoever is doing whatever, there's a transparent, there is a process that they need to go, there is a software development lifecycle process that they need to implement, and all those things. So that is what where exactly DevOps sits. It's not a kind of tool, or it's not a programming language, or it's not in cloud or something. It's a kind of a strategy actually. So it's a software development strategy which tries to bridge the gap between these two teams, like the development team and operations teams. So further, to bridge the gap, we do implement certain tools, we do write automations, we do use cloud and all those things. But overall, it's a kind of we maintain that agility and agile process, or a software development cycle which does all these things. So that's a very important concept of the DevOps. So it's not a tool or something, it's a completely a philosophy or a process that we need to understand. And based on those things, we'll be developing the things and we'll automate the various process in an organization. So that is what DevOps is typically. It could may sound different, or it could be already something you have heard of, but this is what DevOps is about. So let's try to understand some more parts of what developer does and where I literally stand. So as a part of DevOps, like if I'm trying to learn a DevOps course, what should I learn? And why should I learn all these things? Or we get these kind of questions a lot, like where do I start from and all that. Already I have given a kind of course, like where I start with what kind of topics that I cover in the course. This complete demo is based on that. Why do I cover that particular topic, and why you need to learn that particular topic? So that completely relates to those things. So if you see a developer, normally his world is like writing a code, pushing a code to the code repository. It could be a Git in your company, or a subversion, or if you have already seen the GitHub or GitLabs, those are all the things where the developers daily interact and write the code, right? So what exactly I need to understand as a DevOps guy? So I need to understand how the developers works, like what kind of branches they create, or what kind of release branches coming going to happen, and all those things. Like how exactly they work. What is an application exactly? What is a front end? What is a back end? How it is connecting to the DB, how it is configured in connecting to the different components in the application, whether it is an three-tier architecture, or whether it is an MVC kind of things, or all these things I need to basically understand if I want to do any automation, or if I want to inculcate the DevOps into the organization. The first thing is I need to understand what developers are doing, and I also need to understand what is a Git workflow that they are using. So whether they are using a normal centralized one or a decentralized one, what kind of branches they are trying to it could be maybe they could be creating a normal branches and try to work on them like bug fixes or something. But I need to understand at the higher picture what is a release branch and what all those things that the developers are doing, and also the automated testing in the pipelines. Maybe someone is, yeah. Thanks, Musk. So I need to understand the testing part also, like because I need to automate the testings that they are doing. The whole point of DevOps is always in the terms of automation, automation, automation. The things that you're doing repetitively, I need to automate it. So I always think in these terms before doing anything in the DevOps world. So these are the things that I need to understand in the development perspective, like what they are trying to write and what is the kind of branches that they are doing, how the application is exactly configured. This is an important thing, whether they have application server like Tomcat, WebLogic, or they are doing an npm, a kind of JavaScript applications, or all those things. The DevOps, as a DevOps guy, I need to understand all those things. And next, coming to the operations. End of the day, after writing the code, after developing a particular application, they need to deploy into a server. It could be a dev mission or it could be a test mission. But final product is onto the production, like where the end users consume that. That is called a production one. So as an operations, we need to understand. Okay. So as an operations, at the level of operations, what I need to understand into a DevOps world. So I need to have a very Linux basis because almost all the servers are.
Sandeep, can you kick out this MUSK? I think he's deliberately, want
Yeah,
numbers.
just trying.
MUSK, somebody names MUSK. He's deliberately doing this.
Yeah, I think so. His mode of things. Okay, where I am. Okay, thank you. So, if you look into the operations line, what should I understand? For example, in the development world, I have just told you you need to understand these things in order to be as a DevOps guy. So, in the operations also, you need to understand these things because end of the day, the application we take and deploy it onto the servers, right? You need to prepare the infrastructure. If it is an AWS cloud, you need to go there, create the VMs, and deploy your application. So, for all these things, you need a very basics of the Linux, like what is an operating system, how do you create a Linux VM, and how do you connect that, and how do you deploy your application if it is a Tomcat WAR files or if it is any kind of application, how do you deploy it onto the infrastructure. So these are the very basic things that you need to understand as a DevOps guy at the operations perspective. So you need to have understanding of the development perspective and also the operations perspective. And there are other things that you need to know, that is basics of firewalls, load balancers, and how does HTTP and HTTPS works and all this. So don't worry about all this, like even though if you're completely new to this, in the AWS, like we have a course like understand, like learning the cloud and all that, the AWS and AWS services. So we completely, this particular course is completely on the AWS level itself. So I'll show you how to create the VMs, how to create the load balancers, how do you create the root 53s or DNS and everything in the AWS cloud. So all these things are like, I'll teach you how to use the interface and create all these things. But the concepts you need to know, like what is a load balancer, what exactly it does, and what is an DNS name resolution, like the DNS or something. So in this course, we'll get into all these details while learning the AWS cloud also. So that is one thing that you need to know as a DevOps engineer or a DevOps consultant or anything. So if you see, actually every domain will have, like if you see, there are system admins, networking, and security. These are all the guys who are completely into their domain. So I said you need to understand the firewalls, load balancers, but there are certain people like networking guys who has more ability on this, like who are more into the core domain. But as a DevOps, you just need to understand the basics of it, because you will write a code which will automate the infrastructure where you need to create the servers and everything in the cloud. So at some point you need to learn all these things. It's not at the level of system administrator, It's not at the level of networking or security guys, but you need to understand the basics of networking, basics of security, and basics of system admin. As I told you, in the operations, you need to understand basics of Linux and trying to how do you connect the Linux machines and all that. So these things you need to learn. So that is a main difference between a DevOps and a difference between IT operations. And even though your companies will have a system administrators, network guys, you don't overlap with them because as a DevOps guy, it's a completely different challenges for you. So next, so what I'm trying to discuss here is, as a part of operations, you need to understand Linux operating system and the basics of it, and basic command line, like how do you run basic commands in the Linux and all that. We'll go into the course and I'll teach about Linux and how do you install the Linux OS and how do you run different commands that are required for the further DevOps courses. Okay, and next comes the container parts. Like these days, if you see, we are trying to completely do a containerization of an application. So if you take any companies, we are trying to completely build the application around the containers. So we call this as microservices architecture. So previously we used to have a monolithic architecture where you have complete components in one server. And if you want to deploy any simple thing, like for example, if I want to deploy the front end in a monolithic, I need to completely deploy the whole application. So there is a lot of application dependencies on different components, and it would be very difficult for me to only do certain things, and even the bug fixes would be very difficult. There are certain advantages of the monolithic also, but if you look, all the newer architectures are completely microservices. So if you see these days, you are hearing about Docker, Kubernetes. These are something even in the companies they are trying to push every developer to write a Docker file and go ever around the Dockers and try to create all the applications in a kind of microservices fashion. So every service doesn't depend upon the other. So you literally try to deploy only that particular service. And even though you have the functional dependencies, but the deployments and everything, the scaling part, everything will be as at level. Like front end can be only scaled. You need not scale the back end and all that. So all these terms and things will come in later part, but you need to understand the containers are becoming a standard for all the software these days. Like something agile has came before 20 years. After that, since 10 to 12 years, DevOps is something we are hearing. Now we are completely hearing something called containers. So now if you see 2013, the Docker started. Now almost 50% of the companies are completely using the Docker containers. So the de facto standard of the containers is Docker now. So even though you have a different Docker, container runtimes, the Docker is something that I teach in this course. I'll teach you with the virtualization basics, like what is a virtualization, what is a container, what is a Docker, how do you learn complete things about related to the Docker and all that. So now let's come to this part. Like after developers writing the code and all that, they need to deploy it into the servers. So for this, they need to release the application. Like we take the code, we create the artifacts of it, and we try to deploy it into the different servers. So this kind of thing called this kind of methodology is called continuous integration and a continuous delivery. And this complete things will be in an automated fashion. It's like developer writes a code, he will push the code to the Git repository. Then there is a server which pulls that code, which creates some build artifacts around that, and which runs the automated tests, and which will also deploy into the dev stack or a QA stack, we call it as. So this thing is called a continuous integration and a continuous delivery. This complete DevOps will be related to this particular methodology or this particular practice of writing the code and continuously integrating the code and all these things. So you can call it as like in your companies, you have already something called agile, where you have sprints and where you write story points and all that, right? Stories you have. So every time you have a release for once a sprint is done, you have something called minimal viable product or some which is being an artifact or something which is created. There will be regular builds that is running on the code that you write also. So all these things will be tightly packed with the agile and everything, a continuous integration and a build server like Jenkins and all that. So in this course, I'll teach you those things, like how do you use the Jenkins and all that. But if you try to see more into this, so the developers write the code, they push into the code repositories, and they try to run the tests also. So all these things are being automated using something called Maven Gradle. It's for the Java projects, and there is npm for a Node.js. If you see where you package the any app, like using the, you take the code and use a Maven and you create a jar file, and then it could be also a Docker image also. As I said, you these days you're completely using the Dockers and all that. So you write a Docker file where you create a jar, a build artifact, and which you push into the a ECR repository or a Docker hub or something where you can directly push into any kind of environment. So why you're using the Docker here is you have the environment consistency. For example, if you have in your laptop, you'll have a Docker host where you can run the Docker containers. The same thing you do in the production also. The production is nothing but a Docker host where you take the Docker image and run that particular application. So for this, the containers is something very, very famous these days. Since there is a consistency, there is no issues like things are working on my laptop, it's not working in the production. These kind of things are not there. You have a Docker image, wherever you run that, it just runs like a kind of VM. In the initial days that we are hearing, a Docker is very much lightweight than the VM. Here you literally don't need to understand the in-depth concepts of what is a jar file, how do you write, and all these things. Generally the developers will be doing these things, but you need to be in a position to make this pipeline streamlined. Like they need to able to push it, and there is a build server which pulls out, which creates a jar files, which tries to deploy it into the different servers and all that. So this part is something what DevOps literally does. So we write build automations using the build tools and package managers and artifactories and all that. And this complete things runs as an automated. So as I said, you developers will, even a single line of code, when they write, there is a build automation server. It's a Jenkins or something. Jenkins could be there, Bamboo could be there. There are many different build automation servers which will pull the code, which will create the app, which will run the tests against that. It could be a unit test or integration test, and it will also deploy it into any kind of servers. So it could be a dev stack or something. So it's like this is completely called a continuous integration. Like every day these things goes on happening. So there is something called continuous deploy also. Like I just told in the previous slide, that you can also push the artifact into any of the infrastructure. It could be a dev, or it could be a QA, or it could be a production also. That is called a continuous deployment. So generally the continuous deployment word is used when you are pushing your changes to the production itself. Okay, so once the build is successful, it will be notified in the Teams or emails or something. So even if the build fails, that is a job of developer to check his code. If he has written any code which didn't trigger a proper build, then he needs to again change certain parts of the code, and he needs to push the code. So my job is only to build this pipeline. So I'll go to a tool called Jenkins, where I'll create a pipeline. Then the first step could be pull the code from the Git repository. Second step could be run these amount of tests. And third step could be create a Docker image. And fourth step could be push that Docker image to a Docker repository. It could be a Docker hub or something like similar, like kind of a Git. And I can also write another job which is like pushing the a particular Docker image to a production environment. So this is my regular thing that I do. And for this, in the DevOps roles, they call it as build and engineer, build and release engineer. So if you see any job profiles related to the build and release, you completely see about Jenkins, understanding Maven, understanding the build pipelines and all that. So in this course, I'll teach you, I'll install the Jenkins. I'll show you how do you create the jar or any kind of artifacts related to the any build. And I'll completely take a real time scenarios. It's not something a basics examples or something. All the things will be connected. Slowly I'll teach you the Git repositories, I'll teach you the Jenkins, I'll teach you the Maven, and all these will be connected, and you can see how you can deploy it into the different test servers also. Because your completely job profile can be depend upon this. So DevOps is something which gives you 15 to 16 profiles. It could be an cloud engineer. You could be only person managing the AWS cloud. You could be only build and release engineer. You could be an SRE. You could be an agile into only agile. So these kind of things will be there, and you could be only a infrastructure automation. So if you see, my role currently is completely related to the infrastructure automation. I don't literally look into the build and release. So it all depends, but DevOps is something which opens you a wide range of opportunities where you can literally utilize. And this course also, I'll try to see that all the things are very much cleared in this. So you'll have the build and release, you'll have the infrastructure automation, all those kind of things in this. So this is about CI/CD, and there is a bit confusion. People will be telling like, don't worry if you don't know about, if you don't understand what is integration, what is CI, what is CD, and this particular demo is not concentrating of going into in depth and teaching all these things. So later in the course, you will get to understand what is a continuous integration, why it is so important that the company speak about it, what if you don't have it, and what kind of challenges that you get if you don't use continuous integration. All these things you'll get, but these kind of jargon terms like continuous integration, continuous development, at first it could be a kind of confusing because a demo doesn't cover all these things for you. But I'm trying to just try to tell you how everywhere, how the DevOps work and where you can literally fit. If you already have these knowledge, you can get more details of it and you can try to turn your career into that. Okay, and if you look into the continuous integration, developers commit the code and you run unit and integration test. Till then it's called a continuous integration. Many companies do till continuous integration itself. They don't want to deploy all the changes that are there today to the production, so they put as a completely a kind of sprint cycle or something, where they want to push into the production only in certain times, like quarterly ones or something like that. So there is another term called continuous delivery. From unit and integration test, you try to develop into the test environment. It could be a staged or something which is exactly looks like the production environment, where you do something called acceptance testing. So till then it's called a continuous delivery. When you push into the production, then you call it a continuous deployment. So in the interviews, they may ask you like what exactly you're doing, whether it is a continuous integration or a delivery or deployment. Then you need to be very precise in taking the term. Like if it is a continuous delivery, you do till acceptance itself. You don't deploy into the production. Only the continuous deployment you do deploy into the production. So I'll also tell you how do you prepare for the interviews. How in the mid during the course, I'll give you the tips like what kind of things that we see when you're learning the continuous integration or any particular concept. So, but these are the differences between these three, which you need to understand. So this is how the complete CI/CD looks like. So your job could be only a build and release, as I told you, where you'll plan and you'll developers write the code, you run the builds. It's a jar files or a var files or anything, where you run the integration and unit tests, where you release it, deploy it, and operate it. So it's like a continuous iteration cycle. Like this is what exactly agile methodology talks about. So it's a continuous integration and it's a continuous delivery. And for this, you use Jenkins. Jenkins is a very famous tool. And in this course, we'll see about Jenkins and also about the AWS. There is something called code pipeline and code build in the AWS cloud. So I'll cover both of them because, and this is more towards the AWS. That's the reason I'll cover both of them. So that's the reason. If you see, this is an unofficial logo of the DevOps. This is how it looks like, because you have this continuous integrations and deliveries in place where you do all these steps together. So that's the reason they call DevOps in this line of logo. Okay. And if you see where we use a Docker in the DevOps also, this is a kind of use case I just came up. So developers will be writing the Docker files and they push into the Git repo. So don't worry about the Docker and all that. In this course, I'll completely teach you with what is it a container, what is a Docker, how do you create a Docker container out of the image, and how do you deploy your applications and all those things. And next you have the Jenkins server, which does all these automations. So it will create Docker images out of the Docker repo, and it will also store the Docker images in a Docker Hub, and it can also push into the testing or a staging or a production environment. So this is how it looks like: a Docker file and a Docker image VM, and where it pushes into the Docker Hub, and you can push into the staging environment or the production. So this is a kind of use case where you can use the Jenkins. So since I've just covered the CI/CD part, I want to show you the real-time scenario of what is Jenkins and how it interacts with the complete pipelines. So next we'll come into the cloud. So this is very important, and even this course is completely focused on a cloud. So I'll focus on AWS. Like you'll get to know from basics. Like you'll see like if you see the AWS services, there are lot many of services. Like we don't cover all the things because that doesn't make literally any sense, because AWS has hundreds of the services. So for this, we'll look into like many of the services, like how do you create the infrastructure and what kind of things that you need to know to create a three-tier architecture or a microservices in the AWS, or it could be a storage in the AWS and a databases in the AWS. All these things we'll learn. Like if you see, almost all the companies are like predominantly uses the AWS. Even if you see the market share also, like the AWS is something which is leading a lot. So in the AWS itself, I'll teach you about the load balancers, backups, and clustering and security, and a lot of the things will be there in the cloud. And we try to like if you see, even many of the companies are moving on to the cloud. For the on-premise, they have a lot of challenges in doing on the on-premise. So whenever you have something in the on-premise, you need to maintain all the things. You need to maintain the backups. You need to maintain the security part of it and all that. So cloud is something which comes up easily with all these things, the security, backups, and the cloud has something fully managed services where you can just pull it up, pay as per you go, and you just use it and you just come back. So this kind of things cloud provides. So we'll go very internals into the cloud in this course. Like I'll teach you all those things and how do you deploy your workloads on the AWS cloud. And I'll also come with different architectures. So I'll show you like in an AWS, how can you architect the complete three-tier applications, or how do you architect using the microservices using Docker or a Kubernetes or something like that. So so the AWS itself covers more than 2 weeks because of the kind of number of services that it has and all that. So we'll also each and every part I'll show you in the AWS how you can look into the like by learning the DevOps itself. So and if you see, it's a 2019 quarter four, but you see AWS is leading there, and even now also it's a completely leading the cloud market. So like you can be a cloud engineer just learning the AWS, but in the interview, they'll try to see all the things. It's like when they're trying to take an interview on the DevOps, they'll also see if you have good understanding on the CI/CD. Even though your job profile requires you to work on the AWS cloud or SRE or any of the cloud ops or anything, but you need to have the complete understanding of the DevOps. So that's the reason this course is intended in understanding each and every like concept of the DevOps, whether it is CI/CD or an agile or it's a Linux basics, a containers or the cloud. So we'll cover all these things in this course. So next comes with the container orchestration. As I told you, all the companies are now going into towards a containerization and a microservice architecture. So it's a kind of authentication done using microservices, or the application running completely in the microservices. And further, you need to have something called container organization. So the more and more containers you grow in servers, you need to have a orchestrator tool which can literally deploy your workloads onto the containers and all that. So for that, Kubernetes is something very important. And these days, this has become a de facto standard. It came from the Google. And if you know the Kubernetes, the chances of getting you into a job related to the DevOps are very, very high. At least 70 to 80% companies are trying to see that the people are having the knowledge on the sorry, the people are having the knowledge on the containers. So the containers is so much very vital and important in the industry now. So that's the reason I'll teach you the basics of the Kubernetes and also at the level of AWS. So in the AWS, you have something called EKS. So let me just show you. So you have something called EKS in the AWS. So I'll try to teach you about the EKS and ECS in the AWS. So this is how it looks like. So in this course, we'll also cover the Kubernetes at the level of AWS. With the basics of the Kubernetes, I'll also come to the parts of like what is exactly Kubernetes and how do you deploy the Kubernetes cluster in the AWS and all those things. So that is a very important understanding the Kubernetes, which is a very powerful tool and which is required in the for any DevOps engineer to go into the DevOps jobs. And next, we'll also look into the monitoring part. So monitoring is very important because after you build all the infrastructure, you need to understand, you need to look into the monitoring part, like if any VMs are down or if any application is not serving, and all these things are very important. So that's the reason we'll also cover the monitoring. There is a tool called Prometheus and the CloudWatch in the AWS and all that. I'll teach you all that and how do you also monitor your Kubernetes clusters and all that. So this may be like Kubernetes and all these terms only maybe you have here till now, but these are very important and you can just tell next future is completely on the containers. Like I see almost every company is going towards the containers, and they're trying to understand the Kubernetes and deploy all the containers in the Kubernetes. So something that is very, very important for you to have the DevOps career is Kubernetes. So in this course, as I told you, I'll completely concentrate on the AWS ECS and EKS. These are the two containerization services that AWS provides, and we'll look into that completely. And next comes as infrastructure as a code. So if you see your infrastructure is very heavy, like you'll have many kind of stacks like 12 virtual machines, or you'll have the load balancers, you'll have the networking part and all these things. So DevOps also requires these infrastructure to be provisioned and orchestrated, right? So for that, you have something called infrastructure as a code, which tries to see that all your infrastructures are on the same line. So whatever is in the production, it is in the development. If it is a Docker container, a Docker host is running in the production, you have the development also running the same kind of environment. So it's like the similarities. That's the reason you don't find any problems. Like if it is working in the development, if it is not working in testing, or if it is not working in the production, all these kind of differences is completely wiped out if you are having this kind of things. So you can't manually create it. That's a very, very challenging. It's a time consuming. You need to go to the AWS console, you need to create the VMs, you need to create the databases, you need to create the firewall securities, and all these things cannot be done multiple times, and it's error prone. You don't remember all these things. So for that, you have a thing called infrastructure as a code, and which is something we write complete infrastructure as a code. I write like a code which will create the AWS instances and all that. And don't worry, like it is not like a regular programming language. It's a very normal code. It could be looked like YAML or JSON, nothing more than that. You just try to write and put a complete infrastructure in that way, and you try to execute that. And once you run that, all the infrastructure is provisioned in different environments. So it's like you run and deploy your application after that. So for that, you have a famous tools that is, you can combine these things. These days, Terraform is very, very famous and people are using Terraform a lot. So in this course, we'll go into the Terraform, and I'll show you how to create resources using the Terraform. And don't worry, it's not like a regular programming language. Again, I'm saying it's a very normal like JSON or something, where with the minimal lines, you can just create any kind of infrastructure, and you combine it with something called configuration management. So configuration management is what it tries to, for example, if Terraform creates a virtual machine for you, configuration like Ansible goes there and creates Tomcat and pulls your application code, runs your application and all that. So you combine these things. You combine the infrastructure provisioning, you combine the configuration management, and you try to run these things. So we'll deal with these things. It's not like all the tools I'll cover here. I'll cover only Terraform and Ansible, which combines and which provisions and which does configuration management for your all the workloads. So if you see, this is a kind of example combining all these things. So now you have a Git, now you have a Maven for creating the jar files or var files in the Java, and which does by Jenkins, and which does a continuous integration and continuous delivery also, or a deployment, which pushes the code to the production. And all these production environments you create using a Puppet, Chef, Ansible, all these things. So this is very important. So to have a complete DevOps knowledge, you need to understand the cloud and also one of these two, Ansible. And as I'm telling you, these are very simple. This is it's not even like writing a huge code. It's a very simple, like Ansible accepts all the YAML files. You write only in the form of YAML files, writing the infrastructure and all that. So this is how you will integrate all the things. And I'll also show you different architectures and the real-time examples. How do you integrate all these things, and which will be very useful for while you are understanding the things. And one more thing, like you will also, just give me a second. You'll also understand, you need to also understand the basic scripting. So it is good if you already have the Python or Ruby or a Go language, but in this course, I'll go with the basic shell scripting and basics of Python itself. So these are very important. And if you're already equipped with the Python or any kind of programming language, it's very easy. So which gives you more control in writing the automation scripts and everything. But even though if you don't know also, it's not big problem. It's shell scripting is very simple, and also the Python is a very simple kind of language, a very simple scripting language. It doesn't take much time to understand the Python write the Python. It's very much heavily used in the DevOps world also. And for all these things, you need version control, because I told you, you write infrastructure as a code or application as a code and all these things, right? So how the application, the developers use the GitLabs or a GitHub, you also try to put all the code in the GitHub. So we'll start the course like this. We'll go with the basics of Linux, and we'll go with the version control like Git, and later we'll try to understand these systems. So systems is something which gives you uh, Tomcat, like Apache web server or the Tomcat, or how exactly an application looks like. If it is a three-tier application, what are the different components in the application? How can you understand the application and all that at the level of DevOps? So this is what I will give you, and after that you will go to the containers. So where we'll teach you about the Dockers and how do you create the containers and all these things. So I'll use a Linux mission for all these things, and it's not something I'll tell you theoretically. I'll literally install the Docker, and I'll show you how do you write the Docker files and all that, and understanding more about that. So this is how it looks like. And later we'll go with the cloud, so which is completely AWS. I'll teach you about basics, compute, EC2 instances, load balancers, and auto scaling groups where the scaling is achieved, and networking part of the cloud, and basic security aspects and all that. Uh, and also going deeper, we'll also learn about something called EKS, which is about the Kubernetes managed service by the AWS, and we'll also see the ECS. It's also a container service from the AWS, and we'll go with the RDS, where you can create the databases and all that, and also the DynamoDB, which is a NoSQL kind of concept, and a Lambda, which is called a functions and all that. So it takes much of the time. Like we'll also cover the different things also apart from that. Uh, but as I told you, the cloud itself takes you 2 to 3 weeks, and you can combine all these things. And later we'll come to the CI/CD part. Till now, these are all the things we have discussed. I'll teach you about the Jenkins and code pipeline from the AWS. So using this, you can completely automate your pipelines and all that. So this is very important in this course. And for the container orchestration, like I told you, will teach about the container orchestration. Right? For this, I'll teach you the Kubernetes, and which is combined with the Dockers and all that. And along with this, the configuration management. So for this, I'll teach you the Ansible, and infrastructure as a code. I'll teach you the Terraform. So these are all the things that are we discussed till now with the various aspects of DevOps in this. Let's come to the this one. This is already we covered. That is a GitHub. And if you see, you'll be a bit confused of you have seen the various been talking about. You may not know about what is a continuous integration or how it is in the useful in the organization. But for the complete DevOps, to the handhold of complete DevOps, you need to pick up each tool on these things. You need to know the dev concepts, as I told you, what developers do and all that. It's not a big thing. Like when you join a company, they will give you a KT, right? In the similar way, you just see what exactly the application is, what is the developers doing in that. And for the OS systems and Linux basics that you need to understand, as I told you, as per the operations, you need to be able to create the VM, and you should be able to deploy the application, connect to the VM and all that. And the network and security is a very basic things. How do you secure your application in the AWS cloud? So these things I'll also teach you while telling in the cloud. As I told you, we'll go into the security part of the cloud, where we understand the security groups, or network ACLs, or it could be a different kind of application firewalls and all that. So that is very important that we deal in this course. And the CI/CD, this is the build servers and the build automations and all that we do, that is using the Jenkins, and the cloud provider will be AWS. So all these completely, you can see these are the different concepts that we learn in this complete course, and each tool for that concept. So what is a very widely used, I'm just covering here. So CI/CD comes with Jenkins, and cloud with the AWS, scripting with the basics of Python and shell scripting, and the containers with the Docker and the Kubernetes, and monitoring. As I didn't put it here. So next we'll also look into the monitoring part. So the monitoring could be the CloudWatch, and also the Prometheus that I've just indicated in this slide here. And the infrastructure as code will deal with Ansible and Terraform, and the version control Git. So maybe after completing this complete course, you'll be able to understand all these things. And I'll also give you the real-time scenarios and all this will be the hands-on. Like if for example I'm teaching you CI/CD, I'll literally go to the Jenkins website and I'll pull the Jenkins for you, and I'll create a pipeline and we'll run some test builds and we'll run some build pipelines and see how exactly in the real-time scenarios it will be there. In the AWS also, I'll literally create the clusters and I'll create everything for you, the load balancers, and I'll show you how the things literally works in the AWS vault. So this is all the kind of stack that you learn, and you'll be basically combining all the phases and tools in this way. So for the planning and writing the code, we do the Git and Subversion. We'll learn about Git, and you'll have the integration that is Jenkins here, and we'll have the Dockers and also the Ansible. And the instead of this monitoring, we'll have the Prometheus or the CloudWatch. So these kind of phases and tools that we completely go into this course and understand that. So you can just go through different things like whatever I have told in this particular demo. You can just see all these things and try to understand more about that. So I always want people to go to this something called roadmap.sh/devops. So this is something which gives you the complete details of what exactly the DevOps world and what kind of technologies that you're using. So even in this course, it's completely directed towards this. For example, learn a programming language. It could be for example, in this course, we'll deal with Python and shell script. Later on, understanding the different OS concepts. So while I'm teaching you the Linux, I'll tell you the basics of all this. So how do you create the users? How do you check the process? How do you connect to a Linux machine? How basics of networking concepts and all those things. And next comes with these things that I'll teach you the basics of networking, as I already told you. You need to understand the HTTP and HTTPS and all these kind of terms. And in the systems, this is a systems part. Uh, I told about the Apache 3-tier and all that, right? Here you'll be understanding the proxy servers and a web server like Apache and all these things. And finally, about infrastructure as a code, we'll go with the containers part as a Docker, configuration management part as an Ansible, and container orchestration as a Kubernetes, and infrastructure provisioning as Terraform. So all these four things will combine here. And CI/CD is Jenkins, what we try to learn here. And monitoring part, as I told you, Prometheus and CloudWatch we do here, and the cloud providers is AWS that we do. So you can go through this. You can understand how the DevOps world is and what kind of things that you need to understand before entering into the DevOps. Uh, but will in this course I'll teach you all these things, and I'll come with the real-time scenarios, and it's a kind of completely hands-on course. It's not something I'll teach you on the slides and go away. So this is how this course is being directed towards. So if you have any doubts, you can ask me. Apart presentation things I just completed. Yeah.
Hi Sandeep, I'm Sunita. So
Yes.
basically, I'm from legacy system. So I am working in AS400. So to be honest, I'm not sure about how the Jenkins works and how I have to create the jar files and all. So agree
Mm-hmm.
that from my side, I have to do some little background as such. However, how it is that is or how I have to put my efforts towards learning this DevOps as well as the complete CI/CD.
Yeah. So first thing is, even I don't know how to write the Java files like or the var files. Like it's a completely
Mhm.
developer's job. So my
Mhm.
job would be only to design the Jenkins pipeline. So as I
Mhm.
told you, there are different steps in like designing the Jenkins pipeline. Like first step could be the pull the code. Second step could be build the var file. And these
Mhm.
things I'll sit with the developer, and they will be doing that. I'll be just giving them the platform for that. For example, I'll be installing the Jenkins. I'll be installing the plugins in the Jenkins, which will do all the things like creating the var files and all that. So that is the
Mhm.
main part that I'm concerned, and I'm also concerned with the complete development, like complete pipeline, like what are the steps that is involved into that, and the developer will be writing all those steps, writing the like how to build the Maven file, how to do the unit tests and integration tests and all that. So my job will be to completely facilitate all these things. So that's the reason it will be on the end line. Like in more, I'll be working at the level of Jenkins rather than looking into more deep details of what developers are doing. But only the
Mhm.
thing is, I'll have the understanding like what is a var file, what
Yeah,
kind of
that's right. Yeah.
things that they are doing. Yeah. So
Yeah.
for example, if the build is taking 1 hour, it's not a good build. So we have
Yeah.
certain kind of rules like the build should be only 10 minutes or something like that. So if it fails, the developer could quickly fix it and run a new build. So these kind of things, as a build and release engineer, that's my job to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks. And apart from that, one more question, Sandeep. So you're
Yeah,
saying about the Linux servers, right?
yeah,
So everything will be it's an question agreed that we do have Windows, and then
hmm,
the cloud do talk with Windows as well as with Linux, and we do have CLI commands. Those
hmm.
will actually interact. How easy it is with the Linux? So do we really go with the Linux OS only, or we do have Windows as well?
Okay, like if you look into the any of the servers these days, it's like
Mhm.
99% of all the servers are running in the Linux itself. If it is a Tomcat or a WebLogic or anything, will completely have the Linux as a main servers. So it's a de facto standard. So you don't have any
Okay.
Windows has an IIS, but very less share in the market it has. Like many companies have only on the Linux itself as a servers. So it's very important to understand the at least basics, as I've told you. How do
Okay.
you interact with the Linux? So once you deploy your application, how do you check the process? How do you
Okay.
check where you have deployed it? So these kind of basic things that you need. I don't see Windows servers as something which is being used, because even in my firm also I use Windows as in servers. Like I do run the Tomcat, but it's very less when compared to the Linux.
Okay. And
Yeah,
we do cover Putty and Putty Gen as well in this course.
yeah, definitely. That is what, like
Okay.
how do you
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
connect the Linux machines and run all that? Yeah,
Okay. Okay. Thanks, Sandeep.
thanks.
Sandeep, Ram
Yeah,
here.
please.
Say, for example, if one of the resource is a business analyst, if you want to pursue a career into DevOps world, what are the exact roles and responsibilities of the DevOps engineer?
That is what DevOps engineer. It's like a tricky to say that he only works on this. So as I told you, DevOps compromises of many kind of tools and technologies here. So for example, if you can see, many companies could be hiring you only for at the level of infra automation. So they do have already CI/CD in place. So they have the build and release teams who are looking all the CI/CD. So your job could be only related to the infra automation. Like they need a dev stack, which could compromise of they have the complete workloads on the AWS. So your job could be only to create the infrastructure in the AWS and push all the workloads into that. Or let's see that they're trying to containerize their application. So they want a container platform. They don't have anything. So only in the local missions they could have the Docker running and they have containerized everything. Now you need to create an ECS cluster or EKS cluster in the AWS. For that, you need to write a Terraform code which will create the EKS cluster, so that once it is ready, again you'll prepare the Jenkins to deploy the workloads into the EKS cluster. So the role is completely defined on this. Like you can be only infrastructure guy or an SRE. SRE is something like where you completely work at the level of the productions and you see the scaling and you will see the high available of the particular application to be already there. So you design the AWS cloud in that way, or it could be you could be a solutions architect where you need to understand the basic things and where you need to architect the cloud completely based on those requirements. Or you could be a CI/CD, only a release part. So it's a very tricky, but the only my intention is once you are equipped with these kind of technologies that we cover in this course, you'll be very easy to handle those things. For example, if you see a job profile which is completely based on the cloud, at least you'll see that you need to focus more on the cloud and you'll have some time to brush up on the cloud concepts and go to the interview. So it's all I said you DevOps is something which gives you multiple roles. It's not a single role that DevOps
Yeah,
has. Yeah, it's like even if I see every company, if you take a job profile also, they put all these things. Even though they need only a guy who can manage the infrastructure, I'll also see that he has the knowledge of CI/CD, because next day the new product comes or a new application comes, I need to define a pipeline for that. So I need to have my resource to be having the understanding of CI/CD also for that. So it's a all these things, mixture of all these things. It's not a single thing.
okay. And that means no need to be a strong programming skills, right, for DevOps. It's like no development
No need.
involved,
I
no
don't
coding
see
involved.
any. Yeah, if you see all these things, no technology literally requires you any standard programming. If you see the Ansible, it's a YAML files. If you see the Terraform, it's a very similar to the JSON files, kind of HCL we call it as HashiCorp is a company which comes with the Terraform, and they have a very normal text file kind of language. It's a HCL. It's a normal like JSON. Only the thing is, at the part of scripting, you need to understand the basic shell scripting or the Python. Like in this course, I'll just give you an introduction of where the Python is used, but later you can skill up yourself with the Python so that if you have the programming with the DevOps, it's a kind of a killer combination. Because we also see if a person can write better shell scripts and Python, it's a very good thing. But it's not that every DevOps guy needs programming background.
Okay.
Good to have that said.
Thanks.
Yes,
Yes,
Sandeep.
it-
Yeah.
it is,
Hi, Sandeep. Sudhi here.
Yes.
Yeah. First of all, thanks for this demo, which is very understandable. My only query is, so I know this is the process. This is the same process which in every organization is going on, but little bit tools will be changed, I guess.
Different. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, more for monitoring, you mentioned something like other a few of
CloudWatch.
Nagios they are using.
Hmm.
Yeah, CloudWatch, Nagios. Nagios is also one of the monitoring tool, I guess, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Na-
See, if you hear, yeah.
Yeah. What I'm asking is, so instead of learning all these things, this should be know those who are going to face the interviews and everything. But like me, if I need to know only few things like Zit, Zira is also you mentioned in that Zira,
Hmm.
which is I guess this is ticketing tool, I guess, right? Zira,
Yeah, Agile. Yeah.
uh, it's Zira, JIRA, which you
Yeah,
can.
Jira
Jira is only, yeah, it's a tool for ticketing and project management, right? For Agile and
dashboards.
all.
Yeah, exactly. So for Zit only Zit Hub and Zit repository, and one more thing you mentioned Zit something like that.
GitLabs.
Never, sir.
Yeah, Zit Lab. Everything is same, or we need to learn all these things. Zit Hub,
No,
Zit
no.
Lab, Zit repository.
See, conceptually, everything would be the same. For example, if I take the monitoring, end of the day, Nagios does the same thing, Prometheus does the
Okay.
same thing, or Elk does the same thing. But we need to learn only one thing. So even in the interviews also, if a company is already using any of the tool, let's suppose my company is using Zabbix. If you know Prometheus, I'm good with that because the tool itself matters. Only the underlying concepts and how the things works, everything would be the same. Everywhere you'll have
Yeah.
the same kind of log monitoring and all that. So it doesn't. So that's the reason this thing is very important. I just took the predominant technologies in all the things. If you know the Jenkins, that's fine. Like many companies use the Bamboo. Some companies can use the GoCD. Some can use the TeamCity. It doesn't matter. Only matters is how do you build a pipeline. So what are the concepts that involve in a pipeline, and how do you understand this CI/CD part? That's the important thing. The tool it doesn't matter.
Okay.
Okay, that means that
So
my
if
monitor.
I want to, yeah, please give me 1 minute. So if I want to know only Zit repository, Zira, and any other like big bucket, you know big bucket, right? Of course, you
Yeah,
all know.
Bitbucket is Atlassian from yeah.
So we can learn in this course big bucket also.
Yeah, that is what I'm saying. If you learn the Jenkins, Jenkins is very similar to the Bitbucket. So Bitbucket has the same pipelines and all that. You just try to create the pipeline and do all the steps that you do in the Jenkins. So only the tool differs here. All the underlying concepts and only the interface. If I exactly tell you how,
Okay.
if you know the Gmail, you can use the Yahoo Mail, right? In the
Yeah,
similar way.
exactly.
If you
Okay.
know the,
Okay. Big bucket
yeah,
is replaced with Jenkins like this. So alternate tool for CI/CD.
exactly, exactly.
Okay. I was thinking like big bucket is kind of S3
No,
in
no, no.
AWS.
No, no,
Okay.
S3
Okay.
is a storage. Yeah, yeah. So if you
Yeah,
see
that's what.
here, yeah, this is the part. Like only one CI/CD tool is enough, whether it is a Jenkins or a Bamboo or anything. Bitbucket is similar to the GitHub. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So no, no. Actually, my profile is already done, Sandeep. That's what I'm specifically mentioning only these three things like
Hmm.
Zit, completely Big Bucket, and Zira. So for this, can I join this class or any other thing alternative is going on?
I will cover all those things. That's what I'm saying. See, I take the predominant tool that is there in the market. So if you look into the say Bitbucket or the GitHub is the same thing, where you create the repositories and where you create the branches and all that. So Bitbucket is exactly replaceable alternate for the GitLabs or a GitHub. So Jenkins and
Okay.
the Bamboo Atlassian tool is the same one. Yeah. So we'll cover all those things. Don't worry about that. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
how
and
many
and
Sandeep,
Sandeep,
how many to be covered?
How many?
No, no, that this entire picture, how many days it will be covered for all these things?
So it will take around 45 days to 2 months.
Okay, okay, okay. So at least 45 days to 2 months.
45 days is something, yeah, targeted for this complete course. Yeah.
So
Sandeep,
can we get
coming
the
to
lab
the
facility right? Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
can we?
thank you.
Yeah, sure.
yeah, coming to the lab and all.
Mhm.
How do we have, I mean, in the due course of time, will you be letting us what we have to install and how we have to proceed further?
Yeah. Every day that is the part. Like whatever I do in the class, I think that you need to replicate in your laptops also. For that, we'll
Yeah,
take the
that's
help of
true. Yeah, that's true. However,
VirtualBox.
what and all are required have to be notified
Yeah,
to us. So,
yeah.
will that be helpful for us if it is in advance we are notified?
Yeah, definitely that is there because
Yeah,
if I start with AWS Cloud, I'll show you how do you create a free
sure,
tier AWS account and where you start working. Like I'll show you all the free tier things that I do. Like if I create a VMs in AWS, I'll tell you where exactly how exactly you need to create. And if I'm teaching you the Linux today, so I'll show you how do you. I'll do with you along with you. I'll show you VirtualBox. I'll pull up the Linux OS and how do I install. You just do the same things in your
sure,
laptop.
sure.
So whatever
Yeah.
I do in the course, it is something you should be able to do exactly that.
Okay. Okay.
and Sandeep, I think one question. I think thanks for the questions on the similar lines on lab, right? Say for example, if you are
Okay.
in a training in an institute, right, you can provide some systems for the lab, but we're in online
hmm
now because it's pandemic. We're in online now. How you are providing the lab? Like, is there anything you can help me on this?
Yeah. That is
So
what
we need
like
to
you
get more on the
first.
hands-on experience. Yeah.
Yeah. First, you'll if you already having the Windows, you need to install the VirtualBox. I'll show you all those things. You need to install the VirtualBox. On the top of the VirtualBox, you start installing the Linux. So maybe you'll install the two VMs, which is having the two Linux boxes. And after that, each and every course, for example, if I'm teaching you the Jenkins, I'll show you how do you install the Jenkins in your VirtualBox and how do you create the pipelines and all that. So it's very similar. Whatever I do in my class, you should be able to do in your laptop also. It's as simple as that.
Okay. Okay. Thank
So
you.
if
Hi,
I'm,
Sandeep.
for example,
Thanks,
if
Sandeep.
I'm doing the Docker, I'll just install the Docker in my VirtualBox and I'll show you. It's not something messing your original laptop. That's the reason I'm telling. We'll completely define this around the virtual boxes and all that. So you'll install the Docker in that and run the Docker containers and everything in your VM itself, so that your laptop doesn't have anything what you do in this lab.
Okay. Everything will be done in virtual actually, but it will impact our
Exactly.
laptops, right?
Yeah.
Hey, Sandeep.
Yeah.
Hi. Sandeep, this is Prakash.
Yeah, Prakash, tell me.
Your demonstration is really good. You have covered most of the topics in detail, and you are answering to our questions. Thanks for that. So I have one question. So you mentioned like pipelines in Jenkins. So are you using Gradle and Groovy scripting uh, to automate pipelines? So how do you do that?
Yeah. Okay. For now, in this course, we'll only go with the normal Jenkins itself. Like Jenkins has itself as a pipeline script. So along with that, I'll just cover the Maven. I'll not go into the Gradle or another like. I'll only show you the
Good.
plugins related to that, but
Okay.
I'll not be able to show the demos related to more into that because all the things are the same thing. If you understand the Maven, it's fine. It's a Gradle is a very similar like the declarative state language of what
Okay.
Groovy or different things are having.
But to
So it's on a
automate,
similar lines, right?
yeah, I agree. But to automate pipelines, right? So
hmm
nowadays, in the market, basically many of the companies, right, they are expecting uh, uh, to write a code in Groovy so that
hmm
it can be automated.
Groovy, I think so. At the developer level, they'll be asking if you are already have a full stack developer, if you're already writing the build jobs and all that. And only the thing is, you need to have that understanding of DSL of Groovy, what exactly Groovy does, and how do you integrate into the
Correct. See,
Jenkins and all that.
yeah,
That level,
right.
I'll show you. Yeah, and you'll
So
have this thing actually. I'll teach you
But
this
so
particular.
that is a responsibility of a DevOps engineer, right? So
Yeah.
it does not
We'll go
come
with one
under.
example. I'm saying, for
Okay,
example, here I'll just show you Jenkins pipeline syntax. So in this
right.
course, we'll teach you this one. So you can just other things also relates to this. That is what I'm saying. So we'll
Okay.
not go into that deeper. So this is a declarative language I'll teach you in this course. So which is a very similar to whatever the Groovy or
Yeah,
other things are.
this is what I was expecting, because this is something
Yeah, it's a Groovy actually inside.
which is groovy.
It's built on that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and also here you can mention basically you can mention Docker
Yeah,
to.
exactly. Yeah, any build could be there. Any so we'll go this in the deeper way, like in this course. I'll go with completely declarative Jenkins. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, this is what I was
Okay,
expecting
fine. I understood. Okay.
from your sessions. Basically, using Groovy, we need to use deploy Docker. Inside Docker, again, we'll be installing whatever the applications that
Yeah,
are required. So everything it
I'll
has to be
combine all
written
those
in code.
things. Yeah, exactly. I'll combine all those things. Even the Terraform also, I'll try to show you how do you deploy using the Ansible in the Jenkins pipeline. Yeah, they're all integrated slow by slow. Yeah,
Okay.
one by one.
Because nowadays this is what companies are expecting, and in these lines they are respecting a lot.
Yeah. This course is intended in this itself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Sandeep, what are the prerequisites for this course? DevOps?
I didn't get you. I can't. Can you be
What are
louder?
what are the prerequisites for this course?
The prerequisites are nothing. I'll go with. I'll start with very basics, as I told you. First, I'll go with the installing the Linux operating system, and after that, we'll go with the software development life cycles, like what is agile or what is waterfall model. So every course will be with the very basics, like what if I don't have Jenkins? How my world will be? How do you start with? And once, what kind of features that Jenkins introduce? So in the complete course will be in that line. So I don't think so you need any prerequisites, because we are already covering the systems where we understand the three-tier architectures or Apache or Tomcat web applications and all that. So I don't think you need to have any prerequisites. While during the course itself, I'll be very interactive, where you can come up with different questions and scenarios. Will also deal with that. So there is
Okay.
nothing that is much required. Only you can just go to these DevOps roadmaps and you just try to understand what is exactly DevOps and all these jargon terms and all that.
Okay. Yeah, the course is 6 months, 6 weeks, right?
Yeah, 45 days is something we target for. 45 days to like if there is something, if we go deeper on some concept, maybe it can add more or 2 or 3, 4 classes, something like that.
Right. Yeah, 6 weeks. So for 6 weeks, yeah, let me speak. Just give me a few
Hmm.
minutes. Right. So after 6 weeks, let's say if I want to continue to learning on the lab and all, something virtual lab and all, does it still I own it, or is after the course it will be automatically wiped off?
No. First thing is I don't give any kind of lab or something where you can connect to it and work. It's like all in your mission that you do, and you have a free tier account for the AWS. So if you just go to the AWS console, you have a something free tier where you just create that free tier account and you try to. It's your own account. You try to implement everything there, whatever I'm teaching you here, and after that you can just continue that using it and you can just practice over it.
So
So I
that's
don't something, yeah, own something here and after the course it gets wiped out. Every class is again recorded and you can just go back and just go through that.
okay. And that's good actually. Yeah, your course content is really good. Yeah, I'm not in DevOps, but I kind of QA related, but I'm interested in
Mhm.
the DevOps.
Thanks. Yeah.
Most important part is I would like to know the in deep, like what you're saying is a Kubernetes containers.
Hmm. Hmm.
So how much deep you are going into that? So that really are you going to show the how to create the containers and the Kubernetes and all?
Okay.
Are you able
Okay.
to?
Actually, yeah, I understand that question. Yeah. Actually, if you see only the Kubernetes itself, it's a complete some separate world where you need to literally learn for many months. Okay. very difficult learning curve. But here in this course, we'll take help of the AWS. So AWS has a kind of uh, managed service that is called EKS, which gives creating the clusters and deploying the workloads. So we'll try to understand the Kubernetes in that line so that it would be very easy. And along with that, I'll just teach you the Kubernetes basics. Because if I go into the deeper into the Kubernetes, then this complete course itself, Kubernetes course itself takes at least 2 months to understand complete things. But this will only give you a kind of perspective of how the containers orchestration will be done. And using the cloud, you can easily understand the Kubernetes. So only those things I'll just teach you. And I'll create the cluster. I'll teach you the Kubernetes basics. I'll deploy something into the cluster, and I'll show you how do you access that particular application running in the Kubernetes. So up to here itself. And how do you at least monitor the Kubernetes cluster? That's it.
Okay. So,
But not something getting deeper into the Kubernetes and how do you deploy or write the application for the Kubernetes and all that. It's a very different course again.
so basically, you touch the basics
But
of
I'll
Kubernetes.
give you that pinpoint where you can pick up another courses related to the Kubernetes and learn more about that if you're interested more in that. So I can help you out on that.
Right, because Kubernetes is one of the right now market is very hot.
Yeah, hot cakes in the market. Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
something. I told you, if you know the Kubernetes, your jobs is 80% getting.
Yeah, containers and Kubernetes. So that is the most keywords.
Yeah. And I do cover all those things. My complete course is more into the containers and Dockers itself to understand more concepts on that. Yeah.
So basically, you show the Kubernetes basically how to create the container in the AWS and then
Clusters. Yeah.
and not to deploy the images and all. You said, right? That's what.
Basic, I'll show you. One application I'll show you. It's not right. How do you write the Kubernetes deployment YAMLs, or how do you write a Jenkins pipeline to deploy the Kubernetes? That is something very different, I'm saying. That's a different course. But at least you'll have the concepts of CI/CD part of Kubernetes. Yeah. Because we already dealt with the Dockers, right? It's a similar thing again. So we'll learn on those lines. Yeah.
Okay. So basically, Kubernetes, you are going to touch the basic points, not in the real Kubernetes, kind of.
Exactly.
Okay. So another question now, the Ansible. You said the CD, right? In the CD deployment, so you are going to cover the Chef and
Not Chef,
Ansible.
only Ansible I'll cover here. In this course is completely Ansible itself as a configuration management.
So, okay. Ansible, I know that is also one of the market. So how deep you are going to cover those concepts?
So in the Ansible, I'll come up with one. But see, in the complete course, we'll go with simple examples like LAMP stack, where we try to deploy the WordPress or some kind of application. So while even teaching the Ansible, also I'll show you how do you write the Ansible playbooks for deploying a web servers or a Tomcat servers, something like this. So which is very regular for you if you go into any companies. These are the very starting things, right? You start with. So I'll teach you in that level. So using Ansible playbooks, you should be able to uh, configure the Tomcat server, install the Tomcat server, and again combining with the Terraform again, you should be able to create a virtual machine in the AWS. And after that, Ansible comes into the plane, installing the Tomcat or the web server, any Apache web server or something for you. So we'll combine all these things in this way.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, definitely if you can cover the course, because these are the main key heart of the DevOps, like Kubernetes, containers, Ansible. Remaining all are like, those are, whatever the Git and all, these are repository. You can use any other, source control, right?
Okay.
It doesn't matter, whatever. So if you can cover these concepts really a little bit more understanding and more, the easily to when you go to job, right? If you can able to understand this course, if you're able to, get on, survive in the
Yeah.
job, you can teach that level.
Yeah, the complete course is intended in that way. Like once you have completed the course, you should be able to get into the job market and where you can look into the job profiles and you should be able to relate yourself. So my complete intention is around that. It's
Okay.
not that you just learn the DevOps and go away, right? It's a whole point of learning the DevOps is getting into the job. So this course is being covered on that way.
Right, yeah, at least real examples, real time examples, how to create and all. If you can show those, that would be really great help actually in the course. Yeah, right. So you're going to do that, right? Real time examples.
Yeah, yeah, I'll definitely, this complete course goes in a real time. Yeah.
Okay. And what time the course, timings and all?
Can you check? You can check with organizer like what time they're.
From
I
7
think
a.m.
so in
I
the
think it's from 7 a.m. From tomorrow it's 7
yeah,
a.m.
7 a.m.
That's
Hmm.
what I heard.
Yeah, I think
7
so. That's the
a.m.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, even I
7
heard
Well,
7 a.m.
From 7,
7.
but one more thing, Sandeep sir, one more thing. The one you
yeah.
shown, right? Some material, some day off roadmap. That is something material or the document which you can help us to share that with us.
No, it's normal one. Like you can just go to here. Like if you can just go to the roadmap.sh/DevOps, you'll find this. Or you can just Google out as DevOps roadmap. So this is a kind of website which gives you the every time, every year, they'll be
No, no,
updating all the DevOps.
something you shown, something groovy, something you told, right? Some groovy, some documents I saw. All the talks about entire day of material kind of document material.
So
Okay, something
Groovy,
material. Yeah.
that's pipeline.
I just shown you this particular page itself, which covers all the things. I'm not sure if I.
No,
Other
Sandeep, he
than
is
that,
asking about a pipeline code that you showed, right?
okay, this is just from the Jenkins, like
Yeah,
Jenkins
Okay,
pipeline.
from
this
Jenkins
one.
pipeline code.
Yeah, you can just go to the Jenkins and you can just see all the things in that. This is a
Oh, it's
normal
all Google.
Jenkins
It's all
pipeline.
Google only. Okay, okay, Google only.
Yeah, only just I googled out and I'm showing you. Yeah, nothing. Yeah. Okay, fine. Then if you're done with doubts, then I can
Sandeep,
move on.
this is not a doubt. This is final query from my side.
Mhm,
So once we complete all this entire course,
mhm.
how much we are eligible to directly work with the DevOps?
Yeah, that's a kind of tricky thing because, as I told you, it also depends upon your side. Uh, yeah, how do you uh, learn more details? That, for example, someone has just pointed out how much Kubernetes that we need to have here to get into the job market. As I am telling you, Kubernetes is something that you need to learn a lot to get a better job. So it again, for example, some courses I need to again give you the other things. Like for example, while I'm telling you the Kubernetes, I may go only with the basics. I'll tell you to I can show you the other courses where you can take deep dive in the Kubernetes, which will give you the more options in that. But once this 45 days or whatever the course is completed, you'll be at least you'll be in a way to crack the DevOps. It's not a I'll because every we'll see only the many basics only will go into the DevOps. Even if you look into any job profiles, first thing once you go to the interview, it is not something you should be a master of all. At least a jack of all is uh, fine for us. So you need not go deep into each and every technology and understand more details in that. You need to be able to understand the basics of it and how do you configure a simple applications. As I told you in this course, I'll show you the Tomcat or Apache web server or something for each and every tool, right? So at that level is fine for you to just crack the interviews. So I'm pretty sure of it because even people who are using the DevOps in the companies are also all these things are very new to them. Kubernetes is very new to many of the companies. They literally don't know how to implement the Kubernetes on their current applications that they are working. So it's better to have a very basic knowledge, and you need to have the thorough in basics to get into any of the jobs.
So after completing this course, so can we get any certification?
No, there is no certification for this.
Okay.
So if you're done, then thanks for this. Let's see tomorrow in the class then.